This month's Where Did the Road Go is brought to you by three wonderful people, Allison Cook, Super Inframan, and 36 Dingo. It is also made possible by all of my Patreons, and if you want to become a patron, www.wheredidtheroadgo.com.
Transmission start. Welcome to Where Did the Road Go? Join us as we wander off the path and explore lost history, consciousness, the paranormal, unexplained mysteries, alternative thought, and much more. We are present on the web at wheredidtheroadgo.com. Now here is your host, Seriah.
Welcome to this edition of Where Did the Road Go? And I am back here with Nathan Issac of the Penny Royal Podcast.
Thanks for having me back on, man. I'm super excited to talk again.
And we definitely talk way too much about stuff before we do the show.
It's a fantastic discussion, though. Wide-ranging topics.
It's all the secret stuff.
That's right. It's the stuff that would get us in trouble if people knew about it.
And the answers to everything.
That's right. Yeah.
So when you started this season of Penny Royal, you were talking about True Detective and like this roadway thing, like this secret sort of thing going on with the roadways. And do you want to explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I love talking about that. I'm a big fan of True Detective. And when the creator of True Detective this was an interview when he was, someone had asked him about the second season. First season was fantastic. They asked him what he was working on for the second season, and he mentioned that it was going to be about the occult history of the U.S. transportation system. And I was like, oh man, that sounds fantastic. Then the second season came out, and it wasn't really about that.
Yeah, I never watched the second season because people told me don't even bother. The second season isn't that good.
Yeah, it's okay. I enjoyed all three seasons of True Detective.
Wait, there were three?
There's a third season too.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
Yeah. And I really, the first season is just
amazing,
phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I think he was always chasing. I think the first season it took him like 10 years to write that, and then it was like within 2 years he needed to produce another season, and so it didn't have the same amount of time and focus in it. But anyway, it was all right. The second season was okay, but it wasn't about the occult history of the U.S. transportation system. There was some road stuff in there, some stuff about Southern California. But anyway, I thought, man,
even as good as the first season was, I wanted more King in Yellow. Yes.
Well, they could have continued that storyline and gone deeper, right?
Yeah.
And I guess he just wanted to change it up, or I don't know what he was thinking, but ultimately it wasn't as, I think, occult based as it could have been. But he, when I read that interview with Nick Pizzolatto, the creator, when I read that interview, I thought, for him to say that, he must have had a huge amount of research about the occult history of the U.S. transportation system. So I thought, if the second season of True Detective is not about that, then I'm going to educate myself along those lines, because I'm very curious as to what he would have been referring to.
Yeah.
And so anyway, that I'd done a lot of research on Route 66. There are a lot of connections to the Freemasons, and I definitely don't think that the Freemasons are behind, there's any large conspiracy that the Freemasons are controlling the world or something.
Right.
But definitely, when you look at Freemasons as a secret society and as a political entity, especially the fact that a lot of the road commissions in America were the guys that were running that, because they'd been appointed because of political favor. They were in those positions of power. They were putting their friends in other positions of power. If these guys knew that a road was going to go a certain way, then they'd say, hey man, buy up the property in this place, and we're going to connect it to them. We're going to make a lot of money. And so those discussions to make those plans definitely happened in these secret fraternal groups,
Sure.
That were, mainly, white men, wealthy white men. but I started looking into that. But there's just a whole lot of fascinating lore and history of roads in America. One of my passions to research is James Shelby Downard Jr., which I don't know if we talked about that I can't remember if we talked about that the last time, but
I don't remember.
But for anyone who is catching this and unfamiliar with James Shelby Downard Jr., he's the sort of the arch conspiracy theorist in America, and kind of comes out of the 1960s and 1970s. And it's tied into Jim Brandon, William Grimstead. There's a whole lot of weird stuff with Nazis, fascists, and things like that. But Downard, the mythos behind Downard was that he was this researcher who was always wearing a suit, and he had a Colt 45 on his side, and he drove this Airstream trailer across America, visiting all these occult sites. And he was definitely down in the Southwest a lot, along the 33rd degree of latitude. And the story he always told was that he was being persecuted and chased by these Freemasons. And so he also is sort of this motif of the atomic cowboy, right, in post-World War II America. Now, a lot of it is probably invented by William Grimstead and by Michael Hoffman. Again, two very controversial characters. But there's a big connection between the real life Downard, because there really was a James Shelby Downard Jr., but then there's this sort of mythological literary figure that's been created by these other parties for various purposes. But the original guy, his father paved most of the roads in the Midwest. And so there's this heavy element of mysticism and occultism and alchemy that ties into the creation of asphalt in America and the laying of roads. And in many ways, the laying of roads along ley lines and the creation of sort of a mystical network of roads. And so anyway, that was really what I was really trying to research and trying to suss out. And I thought that it was a fantastic motif for the second season to sort of wrap the narrative around, because here in Pulaski County, here in Somerset, Hal Rogers, Senator Hal Rogers, who's actually the oldest, I think he's the oldest GOP senator alive today. He's the senior GOP member because he's the oldest, and he is on the House Appropriations Committee. So he's able to get all kinds of money for whatever project he wants. So he built a road here in Pulaski County. He got, I think it was $20 million for it. And he built 800 feet of the road. And he convinced everyone that this Interstate 66, I-66, was actually part of Route 66, the mother road, right? Mm-hmm. And I thought, man, it's so crazy that this guy was able to get $20 million by making people believe that this was connected to the golden age of America. And so that was a big jumping off point to tie that malfeasance, that local malfeasance, in with the history of Route 66 and why Route 66 is such a mystical road and how it's tied into the the national consciousness. And so that was really I wanted to talk about roads as paths, the journeys, paths to initiation, and just this general idea of roads as a means of change. Because it felt like after the first season, everything that we were researching and the deeper that we sort of got into the pennyroyal of mystery and the more that we found, it felt like a journey of sorts. It felt like that we were on a road of some sort. And so I really wanted to tie that into this theme of roads, but also real roads and the occult history of roads.
Yeah. And just the idea that there's an occult history of roads is weird to me.
Yeah, me too.
It's like they're just roads. What could be occult history? What kind of occult history could there be?
But when you the guests on the second season of Pennyroyal talk about this, and I really enjoyed everyone I talked to for the second season. I asked them questions about roads and their ideas about roads and paths to initiation, and also just the lore of the road, because there's all kinds of older concepts. Josh Cutchins talks about, and a lot of the guests actually mention corpse roads, right? And then fairy paths, and so crossroads and all of these things. But Kiki Dombrowski, who's fantastic, she brought up this idea that that when you're on the road, you're driving, and sometimes you kind of zone out, and then you see a UFO on this back road, or you take a road that you've never taken before. You don't know why, and that's when you encounter the other, right?
Yes, and that's happened to me before.
See, and so I think there's something to this idea of what is a road, and how is a road, how does it correlate with mystical experiences?
Yeah, there's this podcast called "Where Did the Road Go?" But
what?
but to me, that's sort of like, okay, let's find the new paths.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I think
we've been studying this stuff for a century. Now we need to find the new paths we haven't been down before.
Yeah.
But again, it's still a concept of roads.
Yeah, it's still paths and roads. I think, what is it, American Gods, Neil Gaiman's series, deals with the back roads of America sort of as these sort of mystical pathways. But in a bigger, I guess, way that this idea communicates itself through the pennyroyal story is this idea of, again, I talk about it all the time, probably sound like a broken record, but the idea of second order cybernetics, right?
Yeah.
And that roads in many ways, are paths of information. As roads grew across America, it allowed for the flow of information. And the more that information is flowing, the more complex the systems become, and the more that there are feedback loops and all of these things. And so you can really see the spread of roads across America as sort of this neural network that's forming. And there's a lot of, just in the same way in the human brain, or and arguably in AI, that it's the spaces in between the roads where a lot of the magic happens, because those are the unmapped areas. And I think that's also a great way to look at what a road is, what a path is, and what it means to go off. Like you said, where did the road go?
Yeah.
And it's like, when you get off the road, when you go off of the path, what is it that you're going to encounter?
Yeah, very true. And when you're talking second order cybernetics, you're talking about stuff that is altered because of a feedback loop. So it puts stuff out there, and then when it comes back, it changes based on its perception of what it put out there the first time and how it responds.
Yeah. And think about that. I mean, that's what synchronicity is, in a way,
I had suggested that synchronicity is the universe's ad algorithm.
Oh yeah. Yes. Yeah. I love that analogy. I think that's fantastic. Synchronicities, it is a strange thing. I think it's definitely part of, the phenomena, when you look at John Keel's writings and all of his research, and so many other people too, but definitely it's just like the fabric of weirdness that is whatever this is. It seems like synchronicities are almost a building block, or like the atom in a sense.
Yeah. And it's. I think there's different styles of synchronicity too. When Jung first coined the term, that synchronicity that happened in his office was something that completely moved that person, that shifted their consciousness. Whereas a lot of synchronicities are sort of these little ones where you notice them, but they're not causing any massive shift of your consciousness.
Yeah.
And so,
that's.
No, go ahead.
No, so that's totally true, and it's I guess that's the thing too. It's like you probably have thousands of little synchronicities every day, right? You just don't pay them any mind.
Yeah.
They're just, you're filtering those things out, and it is curious to think about the big ones, right? The ones that do cause those shifts. It's because it's that second order cybernetics idea where it's like suddenly you're aware of an awareness of the system. Right. And when that happens, it shakes you out of your perception, because I think people forget that they're observers, right? I think people, they get so used to this idea of I, right? And it becomes a closed system, and they forget that they're observing, and the act of observing creates this loop outside of themselves, and an interconnectedness, that's outside of yourself. And I think that's part of it. I think understanding that and seeing that is a part of all of this.
The one of the other analogies I've tried to use for synchronicities is almost like you're playing a video game. So your higher self is in control, and it's saying, like, okay, I need my character, which is us here, to do this, but you can't directly control it.
Yeah.
So you're nudging that character. It's like, ooh, I'm going to show the character this synchronicity over and over again until it goes where I want it to go.
Oh, that's great too. Well, it's kind of that's sounds like the whole concept of the daemon.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
Or the oversoul, or I always wonder too if is that the holy guardian angel,
right?
That's talked about in magic. That you're really just talking about that higher self that is watching the video game played out, sort of slightly above and behind the moving character.
And Crowley always said the holy guardian angel is your higher self. I mean, so that is the yeah, I mean, it very well could be. You can't influence it directly, but you can use dreams and synchronicities. And I mean, I can imagine someone making this game,
Yeah.
You have to guide your character, but you can't directly control them.
It's almost like the prime directive in Star Trek, right? But spiritually, where it's like you can see yourself, but you can't influence yourself directly. Right. It has to be done through other means,
Subtlety.
Yeah. And cosmic subtleties.
And sometimes your character, on the easy level, your character pays attention. On the hard level, your character is a diehard materialist and ignores all of it.
Right. Yeah. Yes. That's great.
And you're like, come on, just, really? You're going to dismiss that too?
Right. It's like, no, go back. That's funny, dude. No, I think that's a really good analogy for this. And you also wonder in terms of the third man effect, right? That's often reported.
Oh, yeah.
That somebody's saved by this unseen, this person comes out of nowhere where they're dying on the side of a mountain and helps them down. And that's like, they're only one in the snow. They only see their footprints. There's not another set of footprints. And it's like, is that this higher self, this daemon, this oversoul that's manifesting, it's breaking the rules.
Yes.
And then directly intervening and helping you, right?
It used a cheat code.
Yeah, it has a game genie.
It's going, okay, he's going to die, and he's not supposed to die yet. I'm going to have to do something.
Yeah. But you know what? I know that sounds wild, but it's probably, it all probably is something like that, though. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just, all we have are analogies to things we know.
Mm-hmm.
And like, the more I look at it, the more I always go back to that video game analogy. It really is like a video game. I mean, you can take it apart, like with reincarnation. You can say, okay, you have all these lives that happen at once. We don't experience it that way because we're in the system. But if you're outside the system, you could be playing multiple characters in a game, and just jump back and forth between them. And those characters don't know you're doing that. They don't know any, there's been any break in the gameplay. And also there's the, what was the other thing with the video games? I've just lost it. Yay for my brain.
Well, I was thinking, you just made me think of this though, that idea of like, while you're in the game, obviously you don't realize that you're playing the game.
Yeah.
But then when you die, right? And then you have to start a new character. For that brief instant while you're selecting your next character to continue playing the game, you're able to remember that you've played 6 other characters.
Yeah.
And then when you go back into the game and choose the new character, you forget, that you're playing a game again. But it's like those times in between while you're in the selection process, you're able to know, oh man, I keep dying at the same spot.
Yeah.
And
I also, the other thing I was going to say is that if you take that game and you look at the like whatever the code is stored on, everything is there. The entire story is right there in your hand at one time, but you can't experience it like that. You have to experience it by running through it sequentially.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
it's like a side scroller,
And that could be how reality works. It's all there, all the possible choices we can make and all of that. And we're just there to figure out what the best path through is. And maybe in the end, we're there also to create new paths, get outside the programming.
Yeah. Well, the newer games too, they prompt this idea or this thought of, procedurally generated content. So it's like that part of the world that you're exploring didn't exist until you explored it.
Oh yeah.
And then, and your exploring of it dictates what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. Way back on the, it had to be the Commodore 64. There was a game that was called like 7 Cities of Gold or something like that, where you were an explorer going into like the New World, and you could either have it be like actual America, or you could have the game generate random structure, So if you did the random one, you didn't know what was there, and as you got there, it then created that, and now that was, that would be the structure that remained the rest of the game.
Ah, that's fascinating.
So until you observed it, until you went and explored it, it didn't have a particular structure, and then the game said, okay, this is what's here.
That's kind of how Minecraft is.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I've never played Minecraft.
It's my daughter's been getting heavily into Minecraft. She's 7, and so I've been playing. It's been interesting playing that game with her and seeing how large portions of that game are procedurally generated, but it's like once observed, and the computer system is forced to generate probably a random sort of landscape. Once it's generated and observed, then it's permanent. And yeah, it's exactly that. And I don't think that reality necessarily is procedurally generated, but what do you think?
I think very well could be.
Yeah, I mean, it very well could. That's what I was going to say, is just that I'm not a solipsist in the sense that I think I'm creating other people or anything like that.
Right,
I think
right.
We're all independent entities, but yes, I do think that, like, that's what we talked about the last time. There are just too many weird little things where it's like, that seems too perfect that it almost only exists for me.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And definitely those parts of it, it's like it could be, it's probably procedurally generated, but it involves feedback. Like you have to give information to the system, and then the system uses that information to tailor reality a little bit.
And I think people who are more in sync with that probably create reality more so than the people who aren't in sync with that.
Yes.
Like there's a common reality we certainly all share, but we also all have our own independent realities. Because when you think about it, every single one of us views reality differently. Like, because we've had different experiences, we've experienced different emotions, every single one of us. So none of us see it exactly the same way, and certain things that mean something to one person don't mean a damn thing to another.
Yeah, especially in terms of like symbolism and and art, Well, I love thinking about this and thinking about it in terms of Wikipedia and this idea that you want to believe that Wikipedia is created by millions of people, millions of editors, and everyone is helping to find truth, right? But they're not. And it turns out that 80% of the articles are really only edited by 5% of the users.
Yeah.
There are millions of users, but there really are only 5% of all of those, or not millions, but there are probably hundreds of thousands of editors or people that have registered to edit. But really only 5% of those people are what would be called super users.
Yes.
Right?
Yep.
And so those super users to absolutely dictate what's real, what's reality. Because when you think about it, the way that Pittsburgh is spelled, right? There's a controversy on the article Pittsburgh,
really,
of whether or not it ends with a G or an H. And if you were to look at it at any point in the day, it may switch because there's a constant wiki war being fought, an edit war, nonstop by various editors who are trying to assert their view of reality. So I may go look at it at 11:10, and it'll say Pittsburgh with no H. But then if I go back at 2:30, it could have an H. And so
what do maps say?
Oh, I'm not sure. And I'm sure there's a reason why these guys, even if the maps say that, they're probably citing things from 200 years ago or whatever. But there's actually a Wikipedia page about the wiki wars of certain articles that constantly change moment to moment. And so, but I think that's an incredible metaphor for reality, because there are probably super users that are here amongst us, and their opinions on how the world exists or should be perceived affects millions of other people's perceptions of the world. And that's not in a paranormal sense, right? That's just in a cultural sense, especially in the age of social media.
So according to Waze, it's spelled with an H at the end.
Okay, yeah. So, but apparently it switches back and forth. There's that. I'm going to send you a link when we get off here for that page, or that article about those various subpages of Wikipedia, because just to think about that, I'm like, just throughout the day, that entry is slightly changing, right? It's in flux, and so like whenever we agree upon almost everything, right, about a subject, but there's still these tiny little fluctuations that are constantly happening, these little tiny edits. And that, I think that is what is happening with reality too,
Yeah. Of course, the other problem with Wikipedia is they seem to have an agenda.
Yes, yeah, definitely. What was I was looking at I was doing some research on Mormons, and I didn't realize that certain subjects in Wikipedia actually have a designation at the top, and it tells you that you're reading about Mormonism, which may be an invented thing. So it's like if you're reading it and you're Mormon, what you're reading is considered true. But if you're not a Mormon, this may just all be made up, right?
Huh.
But I hadn't come across a Wikipedia page that at the top basically said, if you subscribe to this, it may be true. If you don't subscribe to this, this may be fantasy. And I thought, man, what does that say about the nature of knowledge?
Well, also they take a very low view of the paranormal.
Yes.
And it's not necessarily an honest view. Like the Pittsburgh thing could easily say, some people think it's spelled with an H, some people say it's spelled with a G, and it's not settled. That could be,
Yeah.
But they have to go in there and be right,
Yeah.
And that's crazy. I did not know about that.
Yeah. I wish I could think of the other. There were like 30 or 40, sub-entries on Wikipedia that all had these crazy wiki wars going on, and there were like hundreds of people constantly involved in changing, how the article read. And I wouldn't have known about a lot of this stuff except Darian West, my research partner, and the co-producer on Pennyroyal. We were trying to find information about James Shelby Downard, the conspiracy theorist I was talking about, and whether or not Michael Hoffman, who's a controversial author, conspiracy theorist. He wrote this book on, like psychological warfare stuff. And William Grimstead, who, wrote The Rebirth of Pan as Jim Brandon. We were looking at that stuff, and we had found, I never thought about looking at the edits to a Wikipedia page. But Darian very much was like, let's start looking at who's changing and manipulating these things. And when you look at that, you could definitely see a lot of agendas, and then those agendas gave away certain people, right? Because they look like an anonymous user, or they're using, in the example in the second season, we find this Lynchian guy, and he's only ever edited Michael Hoffman's page, the Downard page, and then this writer named Harry Crews, who strangely sounds exactly like Downard. And so then we were like, is it possible that this guy's in on it? And then when you look at the edits to the Hoffman page, you realize that he's referencing, this Lynchian is referencing messages from Google where they're rejecting Michael Hoffman's they're censoring him, right? Because he's saying some pretty inflammatory stuff.
Right.
Well, the only way that he would be able to copy and paste the response from Google is if he received it himself.
Right.
It had to be Michael Hoffman, who was Lynchian, but it was great. It was just one of those things where I hadn't thought to look at the underlying edits. I hadn't thought to look at the actual editors, and because you can look at the editors and see what other articles they've edited, right?
Yeah.
And so some of these people, we even figured out that one of them definitely was Richard Spence, right? That wrote the Secret Agent 666 and wrote, with Walter Bosley did the Empire of the Will, the first book. Well, he's a huge Downard researcher, and he's really the first person to put out sort of a scholarly article. It was in Paranoia magazine, but I'm just saying it was very heavily cited, and he had very much investigated. I think it's called Finding or Searching for James Shelby Downard. And so we could see that he was editing the Downard page heavily, but then he was editing hundreds of history pages because he's a history professor, right?
Okay.
And it was like, this is definitely Spence. And so I, those kinds of things, looking at the underlying wiki wars, the things we're talking about with like Pittsburgh, instead of say 200 or 300 edits, there are 30,000 edits, and every day there's another 200 edits that are added to it. So things are just constantly in flux, and things that you just accept as true, like Pittsburgh.
Right.
If we went and looked at that, we would see literally tens of thousands of edits to that page.
That's
Why?
Crazy.
Right? Surely somewhere in there's concrete truth, but it's like truth is always shifting.
Yes.
Yeah.
And who's so invested that they have that much time to continue editing that? Like,
dude, I know that's the thing. It's like, but they're shaping. They may not think it. They're probably not motivated by this directly, but in many ways, they really are shaping how the world is seen and what truth is. Because people today, I know I do it. Whenever I'm looking something up, or we have a question, or something comes up in a conversation, I Google it, and the first thing you see is the Wikipedia entry on it.
Yeah.
Right? And so depending on how that's been edited, then I'm going to say, see, right here it says this. Well, that's not necessarily true. It's just that at that moment, the edits have sort of sifted into that, or coalesced into that,
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't know. See, to me, that kind of stuff, looking at the paranormal and looking at these mysteries with that kind of angle to it, right? Because I do think that a lot of things in the world are analog, right? That there's the thing, but then there's that thing sort of reproduced in another system or in another way. And so, I just think the way that data works and information systems and cybernetics, if we really think about things in those terms, we can reframe sort of our concepts of the paranormal or reality or, spirituality.
The other thing I was thinking when you were mentioning Minecraft is that there are people who have hacked Minecraft in ways like not going in and changing the code, but found little things that work and have done things with Minecraft that have never been planned.
Yes. Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the goal of reality. Like, we're looking for those ways to hack it in a way,
Yeah. It's funny that we're talking about Minecraft too, because I just saw an article today about a library that's been created on one of the largest shared servers of Minecraft. And that library, people have collectively worked together to put all of these books and articles and specific pieces of content that have been censored in other countries with heavier censorship laws, especially in China, right? And so what they've done is aggregate all of those censored pieces of data and books and knowledge and put them in this library so that when someone in China or in some, in Afghanistan or some regime area, they're able to just look like they're playing Minecraft, but then they're able to sneak inside this library and read banned literature.
That is awesome.
Isn't that crazy?
See, and that's the good part of the internet.
Yes, yeah.
So what are some of your personal synchronicities that you've had?
Oh man.
Like, what would be some of the bigger ones that you've experienced?
So there's a lot of like really personal ones. But the big ones, definitely the Alexander Guterma stuff was one of the biggest synchronicities, just in terms of how it all lined up, how we found it. Here's a strange thing. that's a synchronicity that I don't know a lot of people know, but like with all the Hellier stuff, it was weird how the investigation that I was doing with Pennyroyal intersected with Greg and Dana Newkirk and the Hellier crew, and they had received information from this woman, and her first name was Amy. I won't say what her last name was, but after I'd spoken to Greg, we had he didn't tell me her last name. At the time, he just said he let me ask what her first name was, and told me. And so then we set about trying to figure out who it was, because this was the woman that contacted them and said, there's a cult down here and you've got to come down here and all this crazy stuff's happening. And so whenever we looked it up after they left, we were able to figure out what her last name was. Well, the thing that was so crazy is that her first name and last name are the same as my wife's first name and last name. And they grew up on the same road, right?
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was really strange. And it was just one of those funny things where, early on when we moved back, my wife's from here. When we moved down here, there were all these like cold checks at the dollar store in these different places that had her name on it. And I was like, look, you can't buy things here, jokingly. and then later, sure enough, 10 years later, I'm investigating all this weird stuff. And then, Greg and Dana and those folks end up coming down here because this woman has contacted them. And sure enough, that woman's name matches, my wife's name. And so that definitely was one of those things that even when I told them that, when I told Greg and Dana and the whole crew, they were blown away because they were like, that's too strange, That's one of the bigger, like, personal ones. Recently, we found out a bunch of other things that probably will end up making it into the third season. There's always it's always weighing this like, how much of the personal synchronicities do you reveal, just because there's got to be somewhat separation, between what's happening here and people, expressing the mystery to people. But definitely that was one of the biggest ones, where it's like, it feels like the universe is kind of playing a practical joke.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
And so there have been a lot of things like that in very personal ways, I'm like, is someone messing with me? Right. Is there something here that, when you think about the whole fact that 111, right, that this is, this town, again, I don't think Freemasons are, trying to rule the world or anything like that, but this town, Somerset, is a Freemason town. It was built by Freemasons. It's very clearly in the history, it's all, you can look all this stuff up. The first bank was funded from the National Freemasons Fund. The bankers were all Freemasons. The town's laid out based off the keystone of the lodge that's downtown. And then we also had a Freemasonic college here, I think one of like 6 in the country. And so, the identity of the town is heavily entwined with that. And so it was Lodge 111, which is, one of the older lodges in the U.S. And, there was the sheriff that was assassinated, Sammy Catron, right? He was also a Freemason in the lodge, and he went by the number 111, right? That was his patrol number. He also flew a helicopter everywhere, and the side of his helicopter had a 111 on it. And of course, he was assassinated at this fish fry. And that had always sort of rang strange to me. There were a lot of undertones of killing of the king sort of ritual. His father was also assassinated, and he was the chief of police, right? And, like, there are weird things like that, but this was another strange one. So knowing all of that, and then knowing that in the Kabbalah and Gematria that 111, and also in Freemasonry, 111 is Aleph, 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 right? And so it's the 3 pillars, and it's seen, or it's translated as guardian of the gate, right? And so that was also strange, because it's like Lodge 111, guardian of the gate, and then this is right on top of the Kentucky anomaly, right? This massive spike of geomagnetic energy. And so it's like, is this place here specifically because there's a gate here? But, again, those are sort of flights of fancy, right? But knowing all of those things, having researched all of those things, we were standing outside my studio that's above Jarfly Brewing, and we were out in the alleyway, and this guy had come from Chicago. He had seen Hellier. Pennyroyal wasn't out yet. We hadn't really disclosed a lot of our research. And the guy comes down, and he's asking me about where the underground UFO base is. And I'm like, dude, there's no underground UFO base. And he's like, I know there is, and I know you know where it's at. And I was like, I'm telling you, there's not one, but, he says, you're a disinformation agent.
Oh, of course.
And I'm like, there's nothing to disinform you of, this is crazy. So he and I were talking. I was being, really nice about everything and respectful and listening to the, his theories and stories. And I said, listen, I'll hit you up online, we'll talk some more. What's your username, or, you're on Reddit all the time, I'll hit you on there. And he says, my username is Mr. 111. And I was like, what? And everyone's standing there with me, and Darian was there, and Kyle that runs the museum here. And they both were like, what? Say that again? He said, yeah, I'm Mr. 111. And he opens his shirt up, and he's got this giant medallion hanging around his neck that says 111. And he had been using Mr. 111 as his username for like 15 years. And I said, do you know that the Freemason Lodge behind you is Lodge 111? And he was like, what? And I was like, yeah. We went, and then I explained the whole thing to him. And that was another one of those weird moments where it's like, it could all just be coincidence, but it felt like a heavy moment,
Did you ask him why it was 111 for him?
He just said that he had chosen that. I mean, he had been in various, he was an OTO member, right?
Okay.
And was involved in a few other groups. I've always thought that he did it because of the whole Aleph thing. I didn't ask him after that. I was honestly in shock at that moment.
Right.
But I assume it had some type of occult undertones. But he was adamant, because I was like, "Did you just create this? Is this a new thing?" And he was adamant that he had it for more than 15 years. And then you look on Reddit, I checked it out, and he really had been on there forever and had been using Mr. 111. So stuff like that. It just things like this was crazy too, dude. Right? I was upstairs recording part of the show when I was working on the production of season 1, and again, Hellier referenced that this woman that contacted them, who has the same name as my wife, right? So she is in the penitentiary here in Somerset, PCC, Pulaski Correctional, or Pulaski Communicator, or anyway, it's the correctional facility. I forget what the acronym is, but so she's there. She's locked up. Or PCDC, that's what it is. The detention center, Pulaski County Detention Center, and so she was in there. And even in Hellier, when they talk to her, she's in jail, right? And I was upstairs. I was working on production, first season. I came downstairs from my studio into the bar, and it was empty except for this one guy. And I sat down with him. I knew him. He's a local attorney, like a young attorney that had been stationed here to work with the county attorney's office, right? It was kind of like a government position. He was going to move on in a year to somewhere else. And we were sitting there, and I was talking to him, and he was like, "What are you doing?" I told him, I was upstairs, producing this podcast. And I told him a little bit about it. He's like, "Well, what's it about?" And so I mentioned this Amy character, right, that had contacted them and said her last name. And he was like, "Oh, I represented her in that case." Right? And I was like, "What?" And he was like, "Yeah, I was her attorney." And I tell him some more of this stuff. Of course, he was like, "Well, I wish I'd known all this. I could have gotten her off on a, on maybe some delusional stuff, but I was, we were just talking about it, and he just said, "Yeah, I'd represented her." So the whole time that we're talking, the bar, and this is like a Tuesday night, so it's always dead, unless it's the weekend. And so slowly the bar is filling up with all of these people, and I'm looking around like, what is going on? So he and I are talking about it, and he says, "I think they look like they're correctional officers." I'm like, "Do you know some of them?" He said, "No, but they've just got the build. It just looks like that." So finally I walked up to somebody, and I was like, "What are what's going on tonight? What's happening?" And they were like, "This is the PCDC Christmas party." And so we were having the conversation about her in prison, that he had represented her. I was upstairs working on the show, on part of it about her. And then as we're talking, the actual people from that correctional facility come into the bar and have their Christmas party. Right? And again, it's like little things, or not little things, big things even, but things like that just, it feels, there's a playfulness to it, right? But there's also a weird, not danger. There's almost, it's playfully sinister,
There's, what is the saying? If you hear a new word, you're likely to hear that word again, within numerous times within the next few days.
Oh, really? Is that a thing?
Yeah, I'm just looking it up. So it says science knows why. You know how when you learn a new word, you see it everywhere. Science knows why. Let's see what science thinks it knows here. Comes down to your brain playing tricks on you. I figured that's what they were going to say. The Baader-Meinhof Phenomenon is actually a term for frequency illusion, a type of cognitive bias that your mind creates. To understand this, you need to know a little bit about cognitive bias as a whole.
I guess it's true. It's like when you buy a new car, when you buy a particular model of that, particular car.
You're going to notice.
Yeah, then you start to see that car everywhere on the road,
But there are also times where you hear a new word that's really archaic or weird, that is not a common word by any means.
Yes.
And then it pops up. And then you're going, okay, that's odd.
Yeah. See, to me, those are the feedback loops, right? That's the second order cybernetic quality of all of this.
Yeah.
And, the stuff that the synchronicities of like the lady having the same name as my wife, or, the being in the bar when all of that stuff sort of synced up. Those things I think are, those are way less common,
Yes.
in terms, I guess that's the thing too about all of this. It's just it's only weird. I mean, it's weird in general, but it's particularly weird to me because of the personal connection to it. And I guess that's what it's been, that's what Pennyroyal has been, is me trying to understand some of this and like why it functions this way. Because I don't think that it's I don't think that there's like a archdemon thing that is observing all of the pieces on the table and orchestrating things, right? It's way more, I don't know, like a more general kind of interaction. I don't know. It's just that's what's so fun about exploring this, and also what's so frustrating is that it's so hard to categorize, and it's hard to find. When I talk to Dan Dutton about this a lot, he frequently says, we have to invent. There's no language that exists to talk about this, and in many ways, we have to invent that language and to even understand the phenomena. Because right now we really don't have a great way of describing it or being able to communicate it to each other.
Yeah, very true. Sometimes, the personal aspect. I mean, a lot of this paranormal stuff, not just synchronicities, but so much of it has a very personal effect. And so, when people say, well, why don't UFOs land on the White House lawn? It's like the list of reasons why is pretty long, but the most obvious one is it's not about, the government. It's not about the society as a mass. It's a very personal experience when people have these experiences. It means something to them. It goes back to Jeffrey Kripal's thing about this stuff happens for a reason.
Yeah. And, and that's the power in this is that, right? The personal nature of it is what makes it, I think, so powerful.
And it's very dreamlike at times too. That's the other thing. So it's because it's a symbolic language, and the dream language is also a symbolic language. Some of this high strangeness stuff comes across like something you'd experience in a dream. Man,
I had this really, really. It didn't make it into the show. I ended up cutting it out. It's available as part of the extended audio, like on our Patreon. But there was a story I tell about. I'm having I had a discussion with Wren Collier about dreaming, right, and lucid dreaming, because he's done a lot of research and done a lot of lucid dreaming himself. And we were just talking about dream time and things. And I had this really weird sort of, I don't want to say spiritual experience, but weird moment where I'd had this reoccurring dream for years where I was in the dream, I'm approaching this, it's a vast green plain, right? And it's like scrubland, kind of. And it's not really grassy, but, it's kind of it's wide and flat. And there's this mound, this single mound that comes up out of the earth. And so I'm walking toward it, and as I get closer to it, there's this shack that's just sitting here in this sort of like desert scrub area, and it's corrugated tin, shack. And so I go inside, and it's like a little bar, and there are all these people waiting, and I'm watching, and then on the horizon toward this mound are these two really weathered folding lawn chairs, right? They're like camping chairs. And there was this discussion that whenever anyone here, these people are waiting to move on to the unknown, it was that they would go and they would sit in those chairs. But once you left the shack and sat in the chairs, you couldn't come back. You could stay in those chairs as long as you wanted, right? But you couldn't come back. But when you were ready, they would just walk on. They would get up out of the chair, walk toward the mound, and then walk around the edge of the mound, and then they would never come back, right? It was that they were venturing into the unknown. And I had this dream reoccurring hundreds of times, right? And in my 20s. And I was like, man, what in the world? This is the strangest thing. And I wasn't, I was researching a lot of stuff, but I wasn't this heavily into the esoteric research. But I'd always thought, man, that is such a crazy dream. And so while I was working on Pennyroyal, I was researching dream lines, right? And as roads, right? And these Aboriginal sort of dreaming roads.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And so I was looking at that. And then I open up this article, and there it is, man. This mound, right? It was exactly what I'd seen in the dream. This mound rising up out of this like desert-like flatness, this scrub area. And it was in Australia, and it was Ayers Rock. It was Uluru, okay? This thing called Uluru. And it's one of the spiritual centers of the Aboriginal cultures in Australia. And I'm reading it, and it says, this is the intersection point of all of the dream lines and all of the dreaming, and that all dreamers at one point in their life must come through Uluru. Huh. Okay? And so then I was like, is that what this was? And since then, it was such a weird moment of seeing the image, an image of something I didn't think existed, that was only something that could exist in a dream. Yeah. And then to see that it existed in real life, but also to see that it was connected to dreaming. Yeah. It just blew me away, And so that was another one of those, like, it's not so much a synchronicity but it was a weirdly spiritual moment, to see that.
That's freaking awesome, honestly.
So I've wanted to talk. I'm dying to talk to someone in Australia about. I couldn't fit that in. I ended up cutting that out of the second season just for time. But like I said, I've got the extended audio that has that. It's like a 18-minute story about that. But that to me was a really special experience. And again, it's like it all feels like a journey, and it all feels like being on a road of some sort. Because that's a dream I had when I was 20 years old, and through my 20s. I'm 42 now, right? And so it's like, 20 years ago, was this stuff all set in motion? Was I ultimately, I was only researching that because of my research into Pennyroyal and to occult roads. So it's like, without Pennyroyal, I may have never discovered that.
And there have been a number of things in my life that feel like they've been set up since early in my life.
Yeah.
Precognitive dreams, things like that, other weird connections that make sense now, but like they could not have been random events.
Yeah.
Also, your dream sort of connects. It's sort of the ending of Lost.
It's been forever since I've seen Lost. Is that? When they're like, are they in a church? Are they?
Well,
in a church?
it's like a church type of thing, but it's the same concept that they're in, and I'm pretty sure it was inspired by the Seth material to some degree. But they're in this other universe, which is kind of like where they're dealing with everything and waiting, and then finally that when they're ready, they can move on.
Yeah.
And a lot of people hated it, but I looked at it and went, that was awesome, because I understood what they were trying to say with it.
Yeah. I loved Lost. I thought it was great. Definitely the ending, I remember at the time was controversial. That's another one of those shows I need to go back and watch because I tuned into that every week. It was and friends would come over and watch it.
Oh, yeah.
Sort of like a great communal thing that I don't think exists as much anymore because of streaming.
Yeah.
But I'll have to see the Seth material too. Man, I've not really read a ton of the Seth stuff. Some of the guys that research with me are heavy into it. And some friends are, but I've never, I'm so suspicious of channeled material.
So am I. That's the thing. Seth is one of the only ones that I will give any credence to because it's very detailed. It's very skeptical of itself. It seems very down to earth, and the practices work.
Yeah.
So no matter where it's coming from, because Jane Roberts herself said she didn't know, could just be part of her unconscious or whatever, the data was at least in part useful.
Yeah.
Most channeling, I've gotten a little more, open-minded toward channeling, but still Seth is the only one where I'm like, okay, the Seth material is impressive.
Now I've got to get into it and see, and read more of it. There's the raw stuff. We talked about that last time too.
And that stuff's not impressive.
Yeah, no. And some of that stuff feels, even some of the Edgar Cayce stuff seems a little, I believe it, but I don't know. Sometimes you just wonder if some of it isn't being channeled from a reliable source.
Right.
I guess I'll say, don't you think that it's weird that Edgar Cayce is from Hopkinsville, where the whole little green men thing started,
That's right.
The Hopkinsville goblins, like that's an odd thing. And that's always struck me as a weird, I don't know. Have you ever heard the story? This is one of my favorite stories of people receiving messages. Have you heard the story about Oak Ridge, Tennessee, and the project to build Oak Ridge was where they built the nuclear bomb, right?
Okay.
And so it was a top secret project. Well, I think it was in 1840 or 1839, 1840, something like that. This farmer who lived in northern Tennessee, where this is, he had this huge farm, and he was out on his farm, and he said this beam of light hit him, right? And it knocked him out or knocked him down on the ground. And he saw all around him this vast city that was on his farm, like all around him. There's all these people, they were dressed strange, they were moving around. And then he saw this gigantic, what he called mushroom, grow up from the earth, right? And so he wakes up from this experience, where he says this beam of energy or beam of light came down from the sky and hit him and gave him this vision. He goes to town and he tells everybody, right? And from that point on, for the rest of his life, he was treated as a nut job.
Of course.
But the thing right, of course, they're like, oh, you're crazy old farmer. The thing that's amazing about this story is that the newspaper recorded that whole thing of him telling, like they recorded the vision, they recorded what he said, and then they made fun of him in the newspaper, right? Well, 100 years, right, later, that dude's farm is where they built this secret city of Oak Ridge that only was built to house all of the people working on the atomic bomb.
Damn.
And it's in Oak Ridge's museum, right, in Tennessee, where they have the museum about building the bomb and all this stuff. They have that newspaper article. And to me, that's, incontrovertible truth, or, proof.
Yeah.
That there is something to all of this. There's something to the nature of reality that is, and people don't tout that. But it's verified. It's, the government even accepts that happened. Of course, people are like, well, he didn't see this, but it sounds like that's what he saw, Right.
He may not have seen it exactly how it was because it was being filtered,
Yeah, yeah.
And that's the thing with channeling too, is that, Seth would always say, you're not getting what he's saying. You're getting what he's saying channeled and filtered through Jane.
Mm-hmm. And Jane's the extent to which Jane can communicate with words.
And plus it would have Jane's biases and stuff like that into it too. Also, what impressed me about Seth is he never claimed to be omniscient in any way.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, some stuff I just don't know. But I mean, one of the things that impressed me is when he said that they asked about UFOs, and he said, those are actually consciousnesses from another reality. So basically interdimensional.
Mm-hmm.
And that he was kind of surprised we could see them.
That's interesting. Well, so what was Seth? What did Seth purport to be?
Just like the oversoul of Jane and a few other people.
Okay. Huh. And where did the name Seth come from?
I forget.
Yeah. I've got to dive into that, man. That's so fascinating to me, especially if there are elements of it that are sort of way more concrete than other channelings.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. And I was so used to seeing channeling works that was just mumbo jumbo and unverifiable stuff. But here was Seth with a lot of detail, a lot of specific sort of things. And it's like, huh, all right.
Well, one of the interesting things to me about channeling too is, and Darian and I, my research partner, have talked about this a lot, the staccato nature, like when you watch filmed channeling sessions, right?
Yeah.
Or if you listen to the raw stuff, there's lots of stuff, and I think probably the Seth stuff is the same way. There's a staccato delivery of it.
It's like someone being puppeted.
Yes, it's like da 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 da. And there's like a cadence to the way.
Yeah.
And that makes me think that there is a passage of information, right? It feels like that's why it's called channeling, obviously, but it feels like there is a conduit, a circuit sort of built, and Darian, he proposed at one point that some of this information is looking for the most, it's Shannon entropy, it's this whole idea of, information theory, that information is always looking for the most efficient channel to express itself. Right, to output itself.
Yeah.
And so, and I've wondered that with like the pennyroyal stuff, right? Did these things sort of come to us in this configuration because we were in the right place at the right time in such a configuration that it was the most efficient channel for it? But were other people also interacting with something, the same thing maybe, but they weren't at the right time? They weren't as efficient as this was as a channel for it to express itself.
Right. Yes. Yeah. And I mean, we're also assuming that anything that's being channeled is going to be completely true and is not going to lie or just make stuff up.
Yeah, because if it's just information, it doesn't have to be true or not true.
Exactly.
It's just information, right? And so it's like, we're the ones labeling that it's a lie. Right.
Yeah,
when
right.
It's just data. That's like saying the output of a computer is a lie. It's lying to you. It can't lie to you. Right. It's just trying to pass information out.
I don't know. I suspect some computers have lied to me.
I do too. I think so also. I don't trust these things.
you get something and you're going, no, that's wrong. And it's like, no, it's not. It's like, no, it's wrong. What are you doing?
That's right. Yeah. Oh. That's
so one of the I still have a list of stuff I wanted to talk to you about. Let's talk about randomness though for the last few minutes here, because I don't remember if I don't think we talked about it last week. We might have mentioned it in the Patreon segment.
Yeah. I don't think so, but I love talking about randomness.
But the random number generator stuff just blows my mind because we definitely talked about it at some point because it's like points of cohesion where things become less random.
Yes, yeah. The whole pair random number generator project to me is verifiable evidence that there are effects on reality. If anything, it proves to me that magic is possibly real.
Yes.
Right?
Well, because consciousness affects randomness.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Which we already know from psi research.
Yes. Yeah. And definitely with this idea that an event is going to happen, and then 24 hours before this globally traumatic event, or just this event that everyone as observers will observe, that the randomness drops, right? Because in order for us to know that reality is functioning correctly, it needs to be completely random, right? It's just a sea of, it's like static electricity or static on a TV, right? It's just got to all be random. And then it's like when a picture forms, when it's less random, then you know that something it's becoming more deterministic, right? And so something is influencing it. Definitely when we talk about like the will of a magician, who's, and especially like I think we talked about this, the chaos magicians and how they're stacking, synchronicities to cause an effect, right?
Right.
And they're imposing their will. So if that is true, then if you had a random number generator in the vicinity of that magician while they're imposing their will on reality, you should see a drop in randomness. I think the same is true if someone were communicating with a disembodied intelligence or a non-human intelligence, any of these things that are, would have an effect on reality, especially synchronicities too, there would be a definable and discernible decrease in what's called Shannon entropy. We'd be able to see that randomness drop. And then we've developed devices ourselves to try to track that, and I think I would love for some ghost investigators, paranormal investigators, even Bigfoot hunters, to take these devices with them, right? And then just leave them running. And if they have an encounter, let's look at the data and see if there's a correlation between an encounter with high strangeness, if there, or even with like a UFO, can't really know when a UFO is going to appear to somebody, I guess.
No, not generally.
But definitely going into a haunted, what's perceived to be a haunted house or a haunted location or a portal area or where people cite things, just if you had something tracking the randomness in that area, if you did encounter something, I truly believe, and it's my theory, is that randomness will decrease, that you'll see an effect, a deterministic effect on reality when you encounter the other.
Well, and that is synchronicity in a sense, because synchronicity is that lack of randomness. Mm-hmm. These things shouldn't happen. They're an effect. They're a result of randomness becoming less.
Yeah. I put this in the final episode of the show, but that whole idea of Magnolia, the film, Paul Thomas
Anderson's. I love that movie.
I love it too, man. And the way that they open it up with all of these sort of Fortean phenomena, right? The rain of frogs, or the woman who...
Well, don't they end with the rain of frogs, don't they?
Yeah, they end with the rain of frogs. Yeah, they open with like 4 or 5 stories of impossible coincidences, right?
Yeah.
And so I tried to open up the episode with that because it's got that great message that these things happen.
Yes.
Right. And so because these things happen, it means that there's something greater at work here, and I think that's a powerful message, and that's what Fort, was looking at. It's the damned data. Yeah. Right, that's the books of the damned. Book of the damned. It's these things that don't fit in with the natural, what's perceived to be the natural order of things, and so it's true. It's like, man, if we had the ability to track randomness, when John Keel was experiencing all the Mothman stuff. Right?
Oh yeah.
Imagine what data he might have had if we had these random number generators when the JFK assassination happened. Or when Archduke Ferdinand was assassinated, I absolutely believe we would have seen determinism.
So the Archduke one is very interesting because that wouldn't have necessarily been a big event. Like no one, I don't think anyone suspected it was going to lead to World War II or World War I.
No. Yeah. And think about it. I mean, the guy failed the assassination. Like the assassination failed. The guy fled.
Yeah.
Ended up in a cafe, and then they had car trouble and drove down the wrong alleyway and pulled up beside the assassin. It's like, that seems impossible, right?
So like locally, I would think that would cause a lack of randomness.
Yes. Yeah. There would have been a huge drop in randomness. In that moment, right when he shot him, it would have been, and see, that's that moment where other people nearby experiencing determinism, in terms of ancillary effects, like maybe they didn't notice it, or I don't know. I mean, this is where I think that some of the research in the paranormal community needs to go, right? This
Absolutely.
is the direction, because I just think we need to, it's personal experiences are one thing, but if we can actually gather data that reinforces those personal experiences, right? And that we can, I feel like also that the Keel and even Charles Fort, a lot of these guys were looking at this, and Jacques Vallée too, right? They were looking at the phenomena from the perspective of gathering data and of theorizing about these things in terms of data and systems and information. And I think we've gotten away from that heavily, right?
Yeah.
And,
I mean, Vallée hasn't, but
yeah. When I read some of these old, I found this great French. It's a translation of a French radio program about UFOs, right? But everyone that's on the show is a scientist, and it's what's his name, Aimé Michel.
Oh yeah, Aimé Michel. He's the one that worked with Vallée.
Yes, and he believed that UFOs flew in straight lines along ley lines. Yeah, right. And so I was trying to find because that is not something that you can find in any other literature. It's only in the French literature. But I'd found this radio show had been produced as a book from '63. Cost like $200. It's one of these like super rare books, But I wanted it because I was really digging deep into the Aimé Michel stuff, right? But once I got the book and I started reading all of the interviews, these guys that were looking at, it wasn't just the UFO phenomena, they were looking at the phenomena of encountering the other and looking at it from a very scientific and philosophical perspective and really trying to advance the ball, right?
Right.
And I just thought, man, what a contrast to today's sort of world of social media and posting grainy videos, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like there's everybody's got a ghost hunting group. Everybody wants a TV show, Well, and
not only that, but the problem is that if you suggest to most ghost hunters, Bigfoot hunters, etc., hey, bring a random number generator with you, I don't know how open they'll be to that, because they'll be like, well, what's that going to tell us? We're looking for dead people. We're looking for apes in the wood. Like the ghost hunters might be a little more open to it than the Bigfoot people would be. But the problem is that they have a laser focus with blinders on in a lot of cases, where they're not open to trying these other methods that aren't traditional to what they are expecting to find.
I know. And that's the key thing too, what they're expecting to find.
Yeah.
And it definitely colors things. I think in the last 60 years of researching all of this stuff, or 60 plus years, we're not any further along than we were then.
No, because we're asking the wrong questions.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. I think people have to divest themselves of asking the questions that have been asked before. And when we taking something like a random number generator, it does seem sort of counterintuitive. It seems strange, It seems strange to think of divination as looking for, you're using randomness to search for the lack of randomness, right?
Yeah.
In a way, it's like you're looking for the decrease of randomness in a random shuffle, and that's where it's actually deterministic. Something's having an effect, and I think that's hard for a lot of diviners or even magicians to wrap their brains around, right? Because it's like, no, everything's just random, you know. So I don't know. I just think these are, to me, this is the exciting part of all of this, and for me too, this is what, you know, this has all been produced by our investigation into Pennyroyal to try to understand these experiences that we've been having, and to try to use, you know, honestly, these aren't new technologies to Darian and I, because we've been, you know, using them to data mine and create data mining software and things like that for clients. You know, when we develop, you know, software applications and mobile apps and things. And so it really was sort of a natural marriage between what we were already looking at and then trying to analyze and understand, you know, these experiences that we were having.
The other thing, aside from asking better questions, is also to throw out some of the assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's so much assumed about these experiences. I mean, just in reality in general, even in science, a lot of things are assumed to be true, and they never go back to the beginning and go, let's double check everything and look at it with the fresh eyes.
Yeah. And that's why I thought it was important that's why I was willing to spend a couple $100 on a book, you know, for that was a translation of French radio programs, because I really wanted to go back to some of these original researchers, especially non-English researchers,
right?
You know,
yes,
to look at the theories, because there is cultural bias.
Oh yeah,
and you know, definitely Western cultural bias, but when you look at European versus the U.S., yeah, I mean these French theorists were way thinking about this way differently than the U.S. theorists were, and so yeah, absolutely, you know, we have to throw away those assumptions that we've sort of, you know, we're standing on those things now.
Yeah. So where can people find Pennyroyal?
So Pennyroyal is on all the major podcast platforms, and you know, Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We've got a website, www.pennyroyalpodcast.com, and again, I brought it up earlier. The Liminal Lodge is our Patreon. A lot of the audio that I cut from the first and second seasons, I mean, there are hours of additional audio that are available for our Patreon members. And you know, if anyone's interested in helping us with the research, you know, the story hasn't stopped, you know, and it's really what I could fit into the first season and what I could fit in the second season. But, you know, the research is ongoing. We always are excited to have more people help us look at this and help us data mine all this stuff and try to understand it. And if anybody has an experience that they'd like to share with us, I love hearing stories, and a lot of times end up finding some pretty insane synchronicities and personal connections with stories that I receive. So we're always open to talking to anybody.
All right. Well, thank you very much for joining me again, Nathan.
Oh, thanks for having me on the show, man. I love talking to you about all this stuff. So, and definitely third season, man, we're going to have you on Pennyroyal. So
I want to take a moment here to thank all of my Patreons. Without you, this show wouldn't be possible. And I especially want to shout out to those pledging $10 or more. Allison Cook, Super Inframan, 36 Dingo, Chuck Shutters, Leanne Sherry, CJ, Tim, Andrew Nichols, Matthew Sproul, Christine, a blue second-gen MR2 drifting around a Japanese mountain, Patricia Giaquinta, Alex Whitcomb, American Rambler, Andrew Maines, Barbara Fisher, Beverly Williamson, Big Boy Limina, Charles Davis, Charles in Florida, land of the crazy and communicable, Christopher Ernst, Craig Cicernos, Craig Parmenter, Crystal Ann Compton, Diane B., Duffy Dowder, Edu Camahort, Empty K, Eric Citron, Eric Todd, J. Otto Bullitt, James Lattimore, Joanna Rojas, John Bracken, Carla Mahoney, Kevin Schreck, Cool Kitty, Kristen L., Laser Printer Jam, Linz Jackson K., Luke Osborne, MJ Armstrong, Jim and Sophie, Mark Bowley, Mark Brady, Matt in Delaware, Patricia W., Paul Jeffries, Ray Benedetto, Riker and Stark, Ron Dupre, Sam Sharon, Stone Wilderness, Tactical Therapist, Taylor Bell, Thunderboy, Tyler Grimstead, Vincent Trewell, Walker, Will Gebhard, Will Powell, Wren Collier, Stephen D., and Amber Hall. Thank you all so very, very much. There is a Patreon segment to follow this, possibly two. If you want to become a patron, where'dtheroadgo.com and click on the Patreon link. It's only $3 a month. You get extra content all month long. All right, I'm going to take you out with some Eliza Rickman. And I've mentioned this before, but Eliza is dealing with very severe Lyme disease. If you want to help her out, she does have a Patreon. And I think that's also just $3. And it helps her kind of deal with all the stuff she's dealing with now. So if you at all like her music, maybe consider buying it or throwing her some Patreon money to help her out. I'm sure she would very much appreciate it. It sounds like a very awful, awful time and thing to be going through. And I'll see you next time. You have been listening to Where Did the Road Go? This show is made possible in part from our Patreons, and we thank you and everyone listening for helping us continue this exploration of the strange. You can always find everything Where Did the Road Go related at www.wheredidtheroadgo.com. And thank you so much for your support.